So if Mark had said to us the other week about evangelism, just told us this is, but what did we catch? Not what he said. We caught the embodiment.
We caught his meaning.
We caught his meaning.
That this is meaningful to him.
We heard the content, but we felt and we caught the passion and the meaning. And
That's
how
right.
It was meaningful to him.
Yeah, it was meaningful.
And because of that, we caught that.
And for Atu, when you were at conference the other week, Atu Langi, you said he told stories, but you caught something from him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kia ora koutou, welcome to Lunch on the Way. I'm Joey Millington, joined by John Hoskin and Greame Flett. How you guys doing?
Good, man.
Good.
It's great. Good to see you.
Yeah. Summer's coming.
Both.
I love it.
Yeah, it's been what, 2-3 weeks?
Of what?
Since we haven't been in the same room together.
Oh, yeah. It's been ages.
Yeah, it's been a while.
And we're not in our offices because we've been kicked out.
Yeah.
Because we're moving.
Because we're moving.
Yeah.
And we
Not because someone listened to our podcast. Let's get rid of those guys.
We've been canceled.
All right, they're out of here, man.
No, we haven't been that. Well, we've said some controversial things that we haven't published. At least
in our Patreon.
Yeah, it's on our Patreon. It's behind a paywall.
Special. Costs a lot of money.
That's right.
Yeah. Maybe we should anyway. I could use some extra money. I'll say some controversial things anyway. So we're in a common space in the library at Laidlaw, basically recording today in the morning before we start our work day. Graham's got a coffee. We're feeling good.
Early lunch.
We've had some pre-conversations before a conversation. But there's something else that's interesting. This is our 1-year anniversary, roughly speaking.
Yeah.
We published at the end of October, and we really started sharing it around in November. And this thing's been a year, and we basically said we're going to commit to having conversations out loud.
It's amazing. We still love each other.
We still,
It's good. It's
probably even more so.
Maybe more so.
You know what?
True.
I'd say that you two are my best friends.
Whoa! That's awesome.
Right to the heart.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
You're my only friends. So thanks for talking to me.
Now I'm questioning, do I have any friends?
So maybe one of you guys could speak to why do we even do this in the first place? Just like to recap. Like, Graeme, why do we do this?
Well, I think it came out of a story, really, because, when we're doing a PhD, it's a lonely journey, and in the corridor down we're working, Jonathan's down there, so we just sort of started to rub shoulders together and found common ground.
Sure, that's right.
Not just in the sort of journey of the PhD, but actually in some of the stuff that we were looking at. Mm-hmm. And that was about how a conversation emerges in the space rather than having a topic, you come to it. And we found that as we talked, like all this kind of rich stuff came out. Mm-hmm. And then I think one day I said to you, because you were kind of like, oh, guys, you want to talk too? I said, just come for us for lunch.
I want to hang out.
That's right.
And I think it was a few times a little bit of time rolled along and you got involved in conversation. And then you were the one that initiated and said, man, this is so good. Why don't we put it on a podcast? And we're going, Jill and I go, yeah, why not?
Yeah, okay. And look at that go, man.
So it comes out of a story. It didn't come out of a sort of, we're going to do a podcast and get a whole lot of, people. Maybe it's a bit flippant to say we don't really care.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Because the primary motivation is one of us having these rich conversations that if it encourages others to join in, then that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think we only had one proper conversation with all three of us together.
Is that right?
And then after that conversation, I felt like I actually learned something.
Wow.
And I was like, I think my friends would learn something too. And so that was kind of the catalytic moment that kind of set things off. And we recorded, I think, 4 practice conversations before we even published anything. Yeah. And then we scrapped those 4, and then I think we went the 5th one.
That's right.
And we quickly brought in some other people like Sam and Roshan, and then later Maya and Karen, and Mark, and then who else did we get? Was that it?
Matt Meslin.
Matt Meslin.
Yeah, and then others.
Yeah.
So that was kind of how it began, and
because we wanted all of our conversations to be unguarded, right?
We did,
and just us talking, not preparing anything really, just seeing what comes out of our kind of heads.
Yeah.
And which can be awesome and go incredibly wrong at the same time.
But
we like living on the edge.
They're the ones that don't make it.
Yeah, they don't make it, and I think that's okay too. We've allowed ourselves that space to be like. That didn't work, man.
I think out of the 25 episodes I've published or conversations I've published, 4 or 5 are permanently deleted.
Yeah.
Actually, they're not. I still have them.
Yeah.
But they're not going to be published. They're just going to be kind of for us.
Yeah.
Um,
We always come back
Yep.
and try again.
I mean, some of the conversations
So good.
or feedback I've had,
Yeah.
which has always sometimes been secondhand,
Yeah.
is that people have been enjoyed the
Yeah.
way in which we've unpacked something,
Mm-hmm.
and it's opened them to actually have a conversation. So I think if this place models where people sitting at the table
Yeah.
talk about stuff and bounce against each other,
Yeah.
that's a really healthy thing in our culture.
and it,
Because the culture's so politicized,
Yeah.
so how would you put it, conflicted.
Yep.
If you have an opinion, how do you say that against, it's like you're taking a personal attack on me. Whereas we're friends, and it's
No,
healthy.
I agree.
It's healthy.
Yeah, it's really healthy.
yeah, and we don't vote the same way politically.
No,
So-
we don't.
No,
That's
we
so
don't.
true.
I learned that when I asked
Yeah.
all of you what you're going to do in the election, and I was like, "Oh, we're actually different."
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're right, because a lot of conversations you go into, even theological and practical, they are typically obviously people are always judging you. They just are, and judgments are sometimes
Absolutely.
good or bad because we need
Absolutely.
to see where people are at.
Yep.
But it's almost like if you don't say the right thing, you're kind of written off.
Yep.
Yeah.
Where it's
Shibboleth.
like,
How are you thinking about that?
well,
Yeah.
exactly. So being in a space where it's like, actually, Jonathan and Graham, what you just said, I don't think is where you're landing.
Yeah.
And that's not your final thought.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
actually, you're trying to say something out loud to get somewhere.
Yeah.
And this is the whole point of the conversation. And sometimes we literally walk into these conversations like, what are we going to talk about?
Yeah.
And then sometimes those are the best ones.
They are. And and we usually land on something. It takes us about 40 minutes to get there.
Yeah.
But that's the conversation. That's how but we're in it for the long game.
Yeah.
So it's good.
You wonder how this relates, but because I like history and I like geopolitics and I listen to a lot of that sort of stuff. But I think it was an historian saying, I tell you who it was, and his name's difficult to say because he's the Jewish historian.
Oh, yeah.
Well, he's not he's a Jew, but he's a historian. I think wrote the history of humankind.
Okay.
Harry. What's his first name?
don't know.
Anyway, he said that history is not a straight line.
Yeah.
It is just a whole lot of like tentacles flowing into each other, and I kind of feel like in our conversations that's what it is. It's not necessarily linear. It's pieces that are connecting at a moment in time that give clarity to where we are in our space and time.
Absolutely.
The
that
person
moment.
you're
Absolutely.
thinking of
It's
is
great.
Yuval Noah Harari.
That's it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know who you mean.
Yeah. He's a very interesting guy. Actually.
Okay. Yeah, he pops up on my YouTube feed all the time.
Does
There
he?
we go.
Yeah, he's really out there.
Okay.
You're what my wife would call a boring YouTube
Oh
feed.
no.
That's all right.
But
I have a boring one too.
That was interesting because we sort of look at things that happen, and that's history.
Yeah.
And think it's that happened and this happened there. It's very
Yeah,
sequential.
yeah.
But he's making the point. No, it's not.
That's right.
And I think that's so that goes for opinion.
Yes.
Like we've arrived at this opinion, but a set of circumstances, a set of experiences,
Yep.
a set of learnings have brought you to that place.
Yeah.
But then that could be, and each of us are that. So that conversation has this lovely melting pot of clarifying a little bit further.
Yeah, I think that's right. That's awesome.
And then with the clarifying, that's why you said, Jonathan, it takes 40 minutes to get somewhere.
Yeah.
And those last 20 minutes are usually the bit where we're like, I wish we had another hour to talk.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
because I'm like, I feel like we're just getting somewhere.
Yeah.
And it's like, we'll continue it next week.
Yeah.
And then
And
we
we
don't.
never do.
We never do.
No, because it's something else's turn.
Yeah,
up,
yeah.
So,
Yeah, exactly. So here we go. Let's do some more reflecting.
Yeah.
What are some highlight conversations for you, if you can recall? Maybe we'll start with the people we talked to, because that's a bit easier to recall, and then hopefully that will flow into something else.
Yeah.
For my
You got you got a top one?
For myself, I think my favorite conversation was Karen Kemp.
Right.
Not just because she told you off, Jonathan, multiple times for loading up questions,
No, I know. I love it. It was so good.
but because she was saying, like, whenever you come across somebody who says something so intuitively true, but you haven't heard before,
yeah,
you treasure that person.
Yeah.
And that's what 5-6 years ago Jordan Peterson was doing in culture on the online space. He was saying obvious stuff that people forgot, right? And that's why he got so popular so quick. And then like Karen was saying such obvious things about pastoral leadership and formation that I had not heard expressed before. but I knew was true. And she was specifically speaking about the identity crisis that pastors are going through right now.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're right. What is a pastor? And we've been going through that shift for 30, 40 plus years with the whole seeker-sensitive model. And it's like, well, pastor shifted then. And then now we're kind of realizing we need to shift from that, but to something else. And we're like, what does it mean to be a pastor? And do I even want to be a pastor? Nobody wants to do this anymore. It's not a glamorous job. Never really was. But it feels like within culture, the mana has kind of been eviscerated from it. Yeah. So, I thought that was one of the best conversations because she just picked something that at least because as a pastor, I'm like, oh, I think you're right. Mm-hmm. I think you're right about that. What about you guys?
Yeah, I'm having to think. Yeah.
Well, I think actually, it took me a little while to just think of it, but when I've thought about it, actually, the more recent conversation that we had on hope, and I went away from that, thinking about the conversations that and the interactions I had with other people, and it was at the time a pastors' conference, and talking to one particular guy and talking about the world the way it was, and I realised that my conversation had really just gone into his of, in a way, it wasn't really hopeful, and it's made me think a lot about hope.
Yep.
It's made me think about, in the midst of a declining church here in New Zealand, and you can read about it, that's not saying anything that's not quite widely out there, that concern. It can end up being a really hopeless conversation. Yeah. And it made me really kind of sit back and go, okay, so what does hope look like here? Mm-hmm. So I was very grateful for that kind of engagement.
That was an amazing conversation, eh? Yeah, and that conversation came out of the conversation that Joey and I had when I can't even remember what we were talking about.
In your
but
office,
I was so pessimistic about life.
We were talking about the environment.
Yeah, it was. That's right.
Yeah.
We never posted that.
We never did.
We had an environmental kind of theologically. What do we do with the?
And Jonathan was like, "It's all going to be destroyed anyway,
no,
right?"
I was not.
I would sound like your theology.
Yeah, I was not. Well, maybe I was at that time. But then Joey said to me, "Man, you sound so pessimistic," and I pushed. And I like got my heckles up, and I was like, "That's not true, man."
Yeah, you pushed back.
went away. But I went away, and I'm like, "Yeah, dude, I'm so hopeless right now." So it made me think about hope, and think about what is theological hope and stuff. So
So that rub was a really, in terms of my own spirituality and
powerful
and being in presence towards others, a non-anxious presence.
Yeah,
really. Now it makes me think. Oh, so how do I posture myself in a hopeful way?
Yes.
This springs off something that, and I don't want to take us in this direction.
No, go for it. I'll bring us back.
So I had this. I happened to just see this podcast, and I won't say where it was, but it's not one that I would normally sort of look at.
Okay.
But this person had been to this ARC conference.
Okay.
And I thought, what the ARC? Well, ARC is Allied.
Church planning.
No. Allied citizen. Allied.
Is it ARCH?
No, it's ARC. Allied.
I know that.
Can you describe it while I look it up?
About responsible citizens. So it's a conservative political gathering, and it has. And I've gone to it and had a look. Now I've lost my train of thought.
I think
I was going to make a point about saying this.
I know what you're talking about.
So it's a political thing and about hopelessness and
that's where it was going.
Welcome.
So it has Jordan Peterson.
I know
it has all those sort of Neil Ferguson, Bishop Barron, Os Guinness, John Anderson, Australia, all these guys, and I started listening to
they've pulled all their resources. It's all those guys that have pulled all their resources, and they've come together and they've created a society that speak into these kind of issues.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the one thing I got about it was, and I think this is a really interesting point. It's a hopeful conversation.
Right.
Yes,
it's a hopeful conversation. Yeah. And because he said, in the West, we've actually now all kind of going, oh, yes, this is a terrible story, we just, we've done all this wrong. And so we're missing the point of that. Look, Western civilization and the freedom that we have has been fought for hard. People have lost their lives, our forebears. And so I think that's what caught my attention.
Got you.
This is, it's past the possibilities about the future.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah,
It's true, and
possibilities.
Yeah. So that was
Yeah,
see when you
the
said
future's open.
when you said ARC, when I looked up
Yeah, I
ARC
know,
Conference
I know.
2023.
Yeah.
It went to a church planning conference for me
Yeah,
because
yeah.
Right.
that's a North American based church planning organization.
Yeah. And I know ARC is arts, religion, and culture, which is another society.
Too many
Yeah.
acronyms, man, that
Yeah.
are all the same. But that isn't. So it was around. So even people who are secular humanists who are of some level, and Bishop Barron obviously isn't, but some people within that vein of Christian nominal thinking are like, hey, we need to change the conversation to hope, not hopelessness.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I think
equally
I think
with
they
that
picked up
came
on
out
it.
this
Yeah.
week about I didn't see it, but I've heard it third hand on a platform about the growing number of young people, Zoomers, I suspect,
Yeah.
who are suffering from mental health because there's no future for them.
Yeah,
That's
Yeah.
hopelessness.
It is, and you can't.
And I'm going,
Yeah.
massively.
and when you look at the media most nights on main platform TV, there's usually an article about some flood or some disaster happening. And you're going, look, yes, that is happening. The world is far more connected, so we're going to hear about it more. But the underlying message here is not a positive one.
No,
Yeah.
it's a message. Like it obviously drives.
Yeah.
We'll pivot from this conversation in a second, but it obviously drives environmentalists to action.
Yeah.
But I think it drives the majority of people to inaction about their own personal lives.
I think that's true.
It
Yeah, I think
might
that's
drive
true.
you to political action to change, I guess, the political landscape and even the actions of the collective
Yeah.
around energy, but it might drive you to do nothing
Yeah, that's right.
within your own personal life planning.
Yeah. Or incredible narcissism that the only thing that you can have control over is yourself. And you see this all
Yeah.
the time. So it's the turn back to the self, and oh man, I'll make of my life whatever I want to make of it. But not thinking about, I could really do something in the culture. I could go out there and change the systems. There's none of that kind of social action anymore.
No.
So, which is a real shame because all the bigger corporations that are shaping the world, they get free reign to do it with no one pushing back.
Jonathan.
Yeah. Anyway,
What's your
another
highlight?
My highlight was actually Mark Hewen.
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
It was.
I'll let Mark know.
Yeah.
I'll send him a clip of this.
Yeah. My highlight was Mark Hewen talking about evangelization.
Yeah.
I thought that was something about. I can't even remember really what Mark talked about.
He
but
went
I'll
for like
tell you
50
what,
of the hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What
he was-
really got me was his passion.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I was just
energy.
like, man, here's someone passionate, not just, passionate about, his job position or anything, but
No.
passionate about evangelizing people. I was
Yeah.
like, man, I caught fire because he was
Yeah.
on fire.
Yeah.
And part of what he was talking about, and at the time I didn't really get it, but he was talking about, I think we need to go back, and it's about friendships and coming back to actually talking to people one-on-one.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's too small. We need to evangelize big. But as I've thought about it, I think he's spot on. Because I stand on the sideline on my kids' soccer games and their athletics, and man, it's the conversation I'm just having with the people around me.
Yeah.
Is where people's lives are changing,
Yeah.
and where people's lives come up.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's where you talk to people. That's where they catch fire after when you're passionate about it. They become passionate about it. So Mark's conversation, epic.
Well, I just had
That's fantastic.
we just finished a national conference for the Wesley Methodist Church of Aotearoa, New Zealand.
Well, say that again.
That's a mouthful. How fast can you say that, Joey?
It is a mouthful of it's a small denomination, big name. Anyway, and the emphasis was around multiply or evangelism, and we heard some really ambitious church planting initiatives within the movement. And we had one speaker, this guy Atulagi, who's a Fijian pastor who pastors.
Atu. Yeah, I know Atu.
He's
Yeah,
a
interesting.
media chaplain, and he's involved in a few other things. He's well known in Auckland, and he did a sermon on evangelism, and it mostly was just stories about his church and what they're doing, and it just got me fired up.
Yeah.
And I was just like,
Interesting.
why can't it's like it seemed to me like the whole church's discipleship model, if you will, was actually centered around evangelism as like the place that forms you as a Christian.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, well, I want to speak to my neighbor about Jesus, but I don't know how to do that. I need to learn so I can go do that.
Yeah.
Or it's like, man, I feel I want to go be a person of integrity to my neighbor, but I feel like I have my soul's divided between Adam and Christ,
Awesome.
It's like,
Yeah.
well, maybe I need to be formed. And so it's like, it's not that like evangelism is like the end goal, but it's like that's actually the lens through which discipleship is viewed.
Awesome,
and I was
man.
like, and
That's
it seemed
so
like
cool.
it seemed like a large percentage of the church was kind of on board with that, and I was like, yo, that got me fired up, and yeah, excited. And I'm like, well, what can I do within my own life? Because I had I know techniques and ways of having conversations with people to steer things in more spiritual directions, but I haven't been doing that. For some reason, they've just been kind of sitting and landing on maybe a political conversation or an ideological conversation, and hasn't really been shifted. I'll stop talking after this illustration.
No, do it.
I was at the airport in Christchurch a week and a half ago, just flying back from some fun with some friends and their kids and everything, and there was this guy sitting at the couches in the lobby in the area at the gates, and I sat next to him, and then Lauren sat next to me, and Audrey was kind of just doing her thing on the ground, and I just asked his name. Oh, he's German. Struck up a conversation. Anyway, our other friends come. Lauren goes off with other friends. I'm still talking with this guy completely freely for like 20, 30, 40 minutes.
Oh,
I
wow.
don't remember how long. It was a good conversation.
That's a long conversation.
Mostly I felt like he was lonely, and he was there for 3 months and didn't really make any friends in New Zealand.
Yeah.
And he was working at the embassy in Germany, and I was like, part of like one of the feelings I just can't bear is the feeling of being left out, of someone else being left out.
right.
Yeah,
I'm like, that just kills me.
Yeah.
I would invite everyone to my house if I could.
Wow.
And so I talked to him, but my one regret was we talked about political conversations and Germany in general, and Russia and stuff as it's impacting German energy, and at no point did I ever think to kind of like shift the conversation.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I feel like that was a missed opportunity,
Yeah.
because I felt like we had like developed a good rapport with each other, even in that brief period of time, to where I could have, because I already said I was a pastor.
Yeah,
you know.
right, yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, I'll stop talking. But that was good. The evangelism conversation is a good reminder.
Yeah, it's a funny one, eh?
Yeah, and it's really interesting you say you've made that comment about Mark. I mean, I play in a band with Mark. So,
Oh, wow,
Yeah,
cool.
so you know,
No
and
way.
and the band is about evangelism.
Yeah, right.
I mean, you know, so
See,
all that to say
I did
this.
not know that about Greame.
all that to say this is that Mark's passion does rub off.
It does.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting. You talked about Atulingi and going to the conference, and passion rubs off.
Yeah.
It's really that's an interesting observation. And,
Yeah.
and yeah, I think that's an important point.
Yeah, and I think it directly comes back to the hope thing. Like, why is this person standing next to me hopeful?
Yeah.
Like, you know, why do they have a joy?
Yeah.
That just speaks volumes in our culture.
Yeah.
So if you're hopeful about the future, people are like, why?
Yeah, yeah, what do we-
Why the heck are you hopeful?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's attractive.
Yeah, it's attractive.
It's attractive.
So this would be a good segue, actually.
Yeah.
Thanks for bringing
Segue
that
us,
up.
man. Go.
Segways. Remember when those were a thing?
Oh yeah, I remember.
It's
Yeah.
so funny.
Did that guy actually die on his own on a Segway?
I don't know.
That's the myth, eh?
Yeah, it might
What's
be.
that? Oh,
The guy who created
The guy
it.
who created
yeah,
it.
died in a
Oh, right.
Segway.
Yeah.
Anyway,
mate.
so I sent through an article, and we're not going to really go through it in depth. I'm going to use it more as a launching pad to continue our conversation. And I sent through an article that Frank Ritchie shared on his social media as a temperature gauge of Christianity and culture at the moment in New Zealand. And the article was by, I think he's an Anglican minister.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
that's right.
Rev Scotty Reeve.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it was an article basically reflecting on how Easter Camp, which is this big Baptist gathering that's been happening for decades, is not going to happen anymore because it's no longer viable
Yeah.
because there's not enough people who will attend.
Yeah.
And
Was it attend or leaders they couldn't find?
probably, I don't know, maybe leaders. It
I
might
think it was
be
leaders.
If it was leaders, that's actually worse.
Yeah, it was leaders.
Yeah,
It was
leaders.
leaders, okay.
So I try to look up to fact check that. I'm assuming it's true because Frank shared it, and Frank is well aware of things that are happening in the church across the country. So I take that as authoritative.
Yeah.
Anyway,
And so is Scotty. You know, he's so
Oh,
active.
is he? I
Yeah,
don't know
yeah.
Scotty.
Let's just say great guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
great guy.
Yeah, awesome.
All
Check
right.
out his podcast.
Check out his podcast. It's called Catch. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah,
Should we
it
do
is,
that?
it is, yeah.
It's called Catch.
Yeah.
I actually am going to listen to it. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
But he basically painted a picture that, Jonathan, you said is nothing new. But
Yeah.
there's this lack of Easter camp as like a big Christian cultural point or moment in the year. kind of reminds us that Christianity is receding into the background. There's a leadership crisis. There's less people coming to churches. This is nothing new. But what he lands on in the end is the hopeful bit, which I appreciated. He's like, well,
that's so true.
Where's the thing? What's the thing that we need to do? He's like, well, the good thing is that it seems like when Christianity is on life support, it's usually at its best. I'm paraphrasing. That's essentially what he said. And he also said that we need to obviously prioritize evangelism a whole lot more than we do.
Right.
I think that's what he said. If not, read it for yourself.
Yeah.
And so that goes in with this conversation.
Yeah, it does.
I think, and within what Mark said was the church needs to realize how to best use and integrate evangelists into the church, because evangelists seems like these rogue agents that are outside the church doing their own thing, and really they're really disconnected to church for some reason or another, because they don't fit within that model of church anymore, of Sunday morning gathering and how you do your ecclesiology. But the example of ought to and the example of Mark is like, well, what does it look like if the evangelist is actually the lead pastor?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
I'm like, well, what would if evangelism needs to be the emphasis, has always needed to be the emphasis, but certainly now more than ever, what would it look like to let our evangelists kind of take the reins and kind of lead things? It's going to be messy. But what would it look like for those?
I've seen that,
you know?
Have you? Yeah, you probably have.
Yeah. Well, the Pentecostal thing, yes.
Right.
It was those, in its 80s, and that's the kind of charismatic renewal coming to the end in New Zealand.
Yeah.
You had a lot of, they were some of them really good, but they blow up a church.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't mean evangelists by like the stereotypical TV American evangelists. I mean those people who have a passion and a heart and a drive to go and seek after the lost.
Okay.
Those types of people.
Maybe those types of people don't become pastors.
Maybe, well, they might not, because exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah. We don't often have a silence.
Any more thoughts?
Have a silence, yeah.
I'm eating my lunch, man.
No, you're not. It's too early in the morning for lunch. Yeah, well, anyway, that was my reflection at least. But then Graeme, after...
I did. Funny thing is, when I read Scotty's little piece there, I didn't pick up on that at all.
No, you didn't.
I didn't even read that part.
No, I didn't. What I picked up on.
What did you see in
I
it?
read
And then I'll
half
tell you
the
about what I
article,
saw in it.
Yeah.
And before tea.
Yeah.
And then we'd had tea, and I said, Linda, I should have a look at this article that Joe sent. And so Linda read the whole thing, and I said to that's a really good article, bro.
Right.
It's really, really good, well written. And
It was well written.
His 3 points are excellent. And I said, does he sort of finish on a positive note? She said, yeah, he turns it right around.
Okay.
It's quite hopeful in the end.
Okay.
And I think his 3 points were, I'm not clear on these because I've only read it once, but one of them was, hey, we've done these big Easter camps. Just to give you background to Easter camps, I think they've been running for almost 30 years.
Okay.
The Christchurch one which is the South Island one, would get 4,000 kids to it.
Wow.
They're big.
That's massive.
I think there's a Central North Island one, and there's the one in Hamilton. Whether they're two different ones, I don't know.
Yeah.
But they've been running a long time.
Okay.
And so he made the point, hey, we've done these camps, and like he talks about him coming to faith, and like, it's awesome, all these Christians, and his dream was one day to stand in front of them all,
right?
And do stuff, and he sort of doesn't. He sort of reflects on in his point. Hey, we've done all this stuff, but have we modelled something that actually is not that good?
Yeah.
That was the one thing. We should.
Yeah.
Perhaps we should have been discipling.
He was criticizing entertainment over discipleship.
Yeah.
That
So that kind of big,
exactly.
the big moment. It's
which is nothing new, but a good thing to be reminded of.
Yeah. And then I think another one was the importance of smaller churches. Smaller groups, was that it?
Yeah, because does he do a house church thing?
I don't know.
No.
Well, he talked about his
know.
own sort of Incan community.
Missional communities or something.
Quite small.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
But he said it was local, and it couldn't get any more local.
Yeah.
It was along those lines. Now, I can't think of what the third one was.
No. But
Yeah, that's what I picked up on it, because I felt like he'd obviously he'd seen that the church is in decline across all denominations, and that but I picked up on it, something's dying, but maybe it needs to die.
Yeah.
And So
Well,
what's been reborn in this? Let's use the jargon in this cultural moment. Like, what needs to die off, and what needs to be reborn? What do we need to refocus on? That's what I picked up.
It was very vivid, and so it was very well written about, the tide is going out, and the Anglican churches now outselling the Baptists, and the big mega churches were just simply up the beach a little bit more, but they were going to be affected.
That's right.
Sooner or later, they wouldn't be pulling on your smaller churches for congregants.
And then Greame picked up on that and wrote a response that was like, well, how do we hand on the faith? To children and grandchildren and all that kind of thing. And I'm like, well, what are we handing on to them? And this is that I was thinking, well, maybe there's some things we don't need to hand on.
Well, this is the good point, because you mentioned around how there was a growing trend and is a growing trend. I don't know if it's growing anymore, if it's stagnated finally within millennial generations of how they are anti-institutional, but they still might be Christian. So it's not that people are less spiritual than they ever were. It's just that they're less likely to actually go into a church. And as a result of that, you're actually kind of throwing out something essential, which is, the framework of kind of Christian expression. That's important. That is actually the thing that enables you to hand the faith down. And I'll give you an example before you go, Graham. I was at a dinner like 4 years ago, and it was really interesting because there were only two couples I knew, and they were all older than me, and they all had kids, and Laura and I didn't have any kids at the time, and we were kind of the pastors they brought along. And there was this one couple that was there that was well known by the Wesleyan churches in my area because they had attended a little bit, but they no longer attended church institutionally at all. And they were really into social justice and that end of thing, especially with one of these mission boats that went out, famous mission boats in New Zealand.
YWAM.
Yes, some kind of stuff like that. But they had said, we still see the value in church, even though we don't go. So we send our kids to the Elam Youth Group.
I've heard that before too.
We send our kids, but we don't go.
Yeah.
And a part of me is like, so they're not going to go.
Yeah.
Because you don't go.
Yeah.
And you don't see it as valuable enough to actually to move into, even though you think that the morality and the ethics and the foundation is important. It's not going to stick because it's almost like telling your kids not to smoke when you smoke.
Exactly
you know?
right.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
What are you saying, Graham?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's what you're modelling, really. I had another thought, but it sort of drifted away.
Oh my
it is what you're modelling.
That's right. Your kids are going to become you, no matter what. No matter how much you hate that, they will. And they get most of their learning from you, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So I don't think. I'm thinking of my own kids
Yeah.
here. So if they listen to this, guys, I don't want to kind of say too much about you guys, but you're a good ones to reflect on. I mean,
we're in trouble, mate.
I think they are lovers of God. There's faith there.
Yeah.
About church, they're not anti-church.
Yeah.
They're not even anti-institutional.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And so my question is, it's just not in their space to happen.
I think this is part. Can I jump in
Yeah.
here? Because I just don't buy. I don't buy the argument, even their own argument, that they're anti-institutional, and I don't think they are, because I think that YouTube is an institution.
Yeah.
And they're signed up, man.
Yeah.
And they're going.
Yeah.
That's bollocks that they're anti-institutional. The question is, what institution are you supporting? That's the question. And I don't buy that they're anti-liturgical. I think everyone is liturgical in some kind of way. We've all got habits that we're being shaped by. It's what habits. Now, the question comes down to which ones do you think are meaningful? Mm-hmm. Now, that's the bigger question. And I think they look to the church and think it's not meaningful for my life anymore. Now, that's where we should be thinking. The church should be thinking, are the practices that we are putting on and the practices that we are showing to the people and asking people to join into, do they present a meaningful?
Are they meaningful?
Are they meaningful?
Yeah.
And what world are they presenting for the people that are turning up?
Yeah.
That's the rub of the question.
And
because people are liturgical.
Yeah.
And they are part of institutions, no matter if they like it or not.
And in my generation, when I looked at Graham's generation leading church, I would see like a rock song being played at the call to worship for Father's Day, and then like everyone got a gift, and it was a watered down message. How I saw it, it was seeker sensitive, and then communion wasn't celebrated or done, and then it was a sending out that was see you next week.
Yeah.
And when I looked at that, I didn't know how to phrase it, but that was exactly what I was feeling. Was where's the meaning?
Yeah.
Is that meaningful?
Yeah.
I can do that anywhere.
Totally. And probably get it better.
And probably get it better.
Yeah.
I could go to U2.
Yeah.
I'll spend $300 on a ticket to go see U2. Yeah, sure, this is free.
Yeah.
And there's some God stuff in there.
Yeah.
But so that was the millennial rejection of the baby boomer generation's incarnation of church ministry.
Yeah.
Was kind of that, I think, was that reflection. And then so they moved more into like the John Mark Comer stuff of the Christian formation stuff.
Yep.
Which is a good shift, but even that can sometimes, the pendulum can go too far.
Yep.
Because then you're so focused on your inward self that you're not even looking at evangelism anymore.
Yeah, that's right.
Because the whole heart of the baby boomer generation was to go out to get the people.
Yeah, so
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the legitimizing of the seeker whole seeker service, the Bill Hybels thing, and Pentecostals sort of grabbed a hold of that quite readily because they're driven by mission.
Yeah.
The church exists for mission. And so it seemed, it's a very Enlightenment, a very modernist way, like, it makes sense. It's just, Americans are fantastic in terms of systemizing something.
Yeah.
It's packaged. This is so good.
It is. It's like McDonald's. You can
it.
franchise this, baby.
We just need to get that. We just get that model working, and it works.
Yeah.
And to some extent, it does.
It does. Yeah.
But it's this at a deep philosophical level. I think what you've got is you've got form without essence. It loses. It leaks its essence.
Man, that's
it just leaks initially. Yeah. And it's like, I guess even,
That's
like
right.
one of my daughters will go to an Anglican service. I can say for one, I won't say which one it is. And she'll go, oh, Dad, really?
Yeah.
But then I've been to, more written liturgical, that's what I'm talking about, liturgical, say Anglican, and it's really rich. It's just, it's because the person is in it. They're imbibing the liturgical movement.
Yeah.
So I think this whole idea of we grab an idea and we think that's going to make it work for us can end up taking away. Not taking away. We forget about actually it's us.
Yeah.
Have we embodied it?
Yeah. I think that's right.
And the meaning, though.
Yeah.
The meaning. Where's the meaning?
Yeah.
And that's
So if Mark had said to us the other week about evangelism, just told us this is, but what did we catch? Not what he said. We caught the embodiment.
We caught his meaning.
We caught his meaning.
That this is meaningful to him.
We heard the content, but we felt and we caught the passion and the meaning. And
that's
how
right.
It was meaningful to him.
Yeah, it was meaningful.
And because of that, we caught that.
And for Atu, when you were at conference the other week, Atu Langi, you said he told stories, but you caught something from him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And here it gets really subtle because, you can look at some of those mega churches and the people are up there are just full of energy.
Yeah.
But when it feels fake. It feels like it's put on. There's a whole lot of energy and they're talking that it's meaningful for them. But do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Often I'm like, this still feels hollow. It feels like the right hamburger with no nutritional value. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's like whenever you watch those.
So what are we really getting down to? What is the meaning? What's that?
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah.
It's like when you watch how advertising companies do like film food.
Yeah.
And then you realize, a cereal bowl's filled with glue and has like the cereal sprinkled on top to keep it floating. You're like, it's kind of like,
exactly
it looks like the real thing.
It looks like the real thing.
But a part of me is like, is that actually what's happening in your life? Obviously, I don't know. But a part of me feels like we're just going through the motions here.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So where is the meaning?
That's right.
Where is the meaning? And obviously, we get back to the whole Jesus is the meaning bit, right? And it's cliche for a reason because it's true 99% of the time.
Yeah.
Let's say 100, or else I'm a heretic.
I was just thinking about being, like even the hopeful conversation.
Yeah.
If it's just about kind of, now I'm going to make a hopeful conversation.
Yeah.
Actually, I have to peel it back and say, why why
No
is
idea.
this a hopeful conversation?
Yeah.
Actually, I have to draw back into the story and into the Gospels.
Yeah, that's right.
And be reminded about Christ. You
Yep.
know, be reminded about Jesus, the way that he lived, and feel deeply challenged by that.
I think that's right.
And thinking, gee, you know, even in the midst of, you know, darkness and difficulty,
Yep.
he transcended that
He did, yeah.
with something other.
Yeah, that's right. I think, yeah, exactly right. And that meaning, I think, comes from, I think is like this comes back to the question about letting the evangelists lead, and I think that's maybe what we need to do. Because they bring a passion for it, they have an empathy for the person standing in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
There's a huge empathy for the cultural moment, and I wonder if that we've lost that. We just want to build the institution. We just want to keep on going with our structures instead of saying, what does a person in front of me need at this moment? What's the question that I can answer for them? What meaning can I give to their life situation? And then suddenly the church becomes innovators, because you can't, because the way that we're doing is not answering the question that they're asking. So we could say, how do we do it?
Yeah.
And evangelists are so good at that.
Yeah.
They're tacking the whole time. How can I get this conversation to move my way? How can I listen to this person
That's a great analogy.
and give them what they need in this moment? And it's always different.
Yeah.
Yet but they're so inviting, because at every moment they're thinking, this person needs something that I have.
Yeah.
And however they present to me, I'm going to try and answer it for them.
Great analogy.
So go for it.
The America's Cup. I loved the America's Cup 2 years ago when it came to Auckland with those sophisticated boats. I never watched it before until I moved here, and I'm like, this is amazing, because they do just that. They're constantly getting weather reports into their headset on the boat, and they're like, there's going to be a 30 knot gust that's going to come out of nowhere in about 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Tack then. Boom. Then they win.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
And so that's a great analogy. That's what evangelists do very naturally. The second thought around they see the person, and they have the compassion that they want the best for that person.
That's lovely.
It's empathetic.
Exactly.
And it's that story. It's an old one of the magicians or illusionists, Penn and Teller.
Yep.
Is Penn the one that talks?
I think so.
So Penn
He's
was
a tall
talking.
guy.
Yeah, tall guy.
Yeah.
Penn was essentially sharing how he had somebody who was a Christian trying to evangelize.
Yeah.
And he could actually see the care and the love in this guy's eyes,
Yeah.
and he doesn't even know who he is.
Yeah.
And Penn was like, at one level, I could be like, who is this guy talking to me about Jesus? Oh my goodness, what an imposition. But he didn't take it like that at all. He's an atheist. He took it like, wow, this person, if they really believe that I'm going to hell, which is how they articulated it, but in a very loving way.
Yep.
Then he took time out of his day to come to me, to talk to me, why? Probably because he loves me.
Yeah, amazing.
And he doesn't even know me.
Yeah.
Why would anyone else do that?
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm not convinced by his arguments. I don't believe in his ideology.
Yeah.
But I can't dismiss the love that I felt in that moment.
That's mental.
And
that's awesome.
Yeah, and it brought him to tears.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
I
think that's exactly it.
Yeah.
And then that's just the individual. I
Yeah.
think the church needs to have an empathy for the whole cultural moment that we're in. And I
Can you
wonder.
elaborate on that?
No, I can't. But
Sounded good though, Jonathan.
Oh, Jonathan, that sounds so good.
yeah. But it's
Keep going.
Well, I just for the culture we're so antagonistic. Oh man, you guys have got it wrong. It's like no, you guys. We should be thinking.
Yeah.
You guys are unwell, and we have salvation, which of course comes from the etymologically. We have the healing. We have the healing balm. Something that you're unwell and you feel sick in this moment, and that sickness is showing itself as hopelessness. We have the healing balm.
Yeah.
There's a balm in Gilead. You know that classic saying, there's a balm in Gilead, man. That's why, and Pope Francis is so good with this, where he gives the analogy, the church is a hospital.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a place of antagonistic. We're not out there to fight people. We're out there to bring healing to people.
Yeah.
We're empathetic for the cultural moment that people are in.
And it's
and
not.
we're caught up in it too.
Yeah.
So it's a whole different posture inside the culture.
And it's not to say that the.
I don't know if that's right, but
No. I think you're close. It's not to say that the world is wrong. No, the world is ill. It's sick, and we're sick too.
And we're sick too.
But the difference is we know where the remedy is, and we're on a journey of getting well.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we've been declared well, if we're talking theologically. We've been declared well in a moment, and God has saved us, but he is saving us, and he is making us well. And do you want to be well as well?
Yeah, that's right. And all the best evangelists bring that kind of message, I think.
Yeah, so that's the culture.
That's to culture, yeah. Exactly right.
I think too, and this is just language.
Yeah.
And I picked it up in that ARC thing that we talk about that?
Yeah, we did.
The line they were constantly on using was story,
right,
and imagination.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, on one hand, is leaning into the other. You said something beautiful before.
Thank you,
Joey. But you said you don't like seeing this guy you talk to. You don't like seeing him out alone.
Oh yeah, I don't like seeing people alone.
I really identify with that because I want to bring people in and gather and make them feel they're included.
Yeah.
But part of that, I think, is that leaning into that space and say, we've all got a story.
Yep.
And we just need a little bit of space to hear what their story is, to say, do you know there's a bigger story?
Yeah.
Or there's a better story.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
To live into.
That's right.
It's a story of hope.
Yep.
Because the stories out there at the moment are not very hopeful.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
well,
that's exactly right.
The phrase I wanted to say, which I forgot at the time when I was sharing that, was an unbearable feeling. One of my unbearable feelings I have is seeing somebody being alone or being rejected or being left out. That's I can't. Yeah, that does not sit well with me.
Yeah.
And I was reflecting on that. I'm like, why is that the case? Because that's not everyone's unbearable feeling. And it's because there was this kid who I went to school with from basically grade 3 up to finishing high school. He was always a loner, really kind, really nice, but didn't have any friends. And he didn't his family was in poverty, lived in a trailer park, didn't socialize well, all these different presenting things, right? Yeah. But he's still a nice guy. And nobody was his friend for his entire schooling. And I'm around him. And even to this day, I'm like, why didn't I do anything? Why? I was nice to him when it was convenient. But why didn't I do anything? And I think because of that experience in that moment, it's almost like God is like, I will no longer let you bear situations like that. And I'm like, okay.
I think that's really interesting. In my mind, those become like the superpower that you hold, and that I will have an experience of the same. That one of my things is that, if I do something wrong, I need to go back and apologize to that person. And it's and we do it all the time. But it's in apologizing to people, they see you as like, oh, this person's come back and thought that I'm worth apologizing to, and that they got it wrong, and it opens up a conversation, and that comes from my childhood too. But it becomes a gateway for us to interact with people that aren't Christians. And I think we need to listen to those those deeply embedded stories of our own lives, and let them be kind of paths to other people. It's a strange thing, eh?
Yeah,
I mean, listening to that, it's cool, man.
Because I identify with that story of not being the one that had no friends, but I know people at school. And often the image that sits in my mind, because I was quite small when I was younger, and you know how when you'd line up for a team and you'd put in 2 lines and then you'd pick, you always pick the biggest players first. Was often the last one.
Because
I was small.
Unless you're playing hide and seek.
It didn't make me feel very, very affirmed. And so there's a kind of empathy.
Absolutely.
That sense of being out, not included, is my. What did you call that?
Unbearable feeling.
That's great.
Well, that was a Soul Tour.
That's a lovely
phrase.
That's a lovely.
If you know what Soul Tour is, it's a New Zealand-based kind of Christian counseling thing.
Unbearable feeling. That's a really nice phrase.
It's really good, man.
But it's interesting how in your imagination, this sits there as this narrative, as a story.
That's pretty cool.
which has that
yeah.
God element around it.
It does.
To clarify, unbearable feeling can also mean the feeling that makes you act in a toxic way.
Right.
Yeah. But I put a positive spin on it.
Yeah, it's good, man.
Well, it's redeemed.
It's redeemed. It's a redeemed feeling. Yeah.
Well, like all stories, and I've had students here, really horrific stories.
Yeah.
And gone through, walk with them, and I remember one particular person was, my story's still bad, Graham. I said, yeah, but that story, God turns it, and it becomes the strength, because the story, you don't push a story away.
No.
It's a part of you. You can't never leave you.
Yeah, that's right.
But actually, it becomes a good story because look what God has done, and you've come from there. That's hopeful.
That's hopeful.
Yeah.
That's hopeful.
So
That's,
true.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah,
And those
like
are the-
every
yeah.
year. So I like to say to myself, "Man, you should have seen me a year ago.
I
Like I was
know.
really bad. You just those are our stories.
Yeah.
We're constantly, hopefully,
Yeah.
But to go back to the evangelistic front, I'm like, I think a lot of people, when they think of evangelism and sharing Jesus, they think of preaching and just like kind of delivering a message.
That's a good point.
But I'm like, no, I think it's around what we touched on. It's actually connecting with the deeper transcendent moments of humanity. That not transcendent as in above us, but transcendent as in like they sprawl amongst all of us. I guess not transcendent, imminent. Yeah, that's maybe more appropriate. Where like there's these deep felt things that are compelling us into something that we have within our story, and I guess how can you utilize those unbearable feelings to lead you into sharing the hope that you have?
Yep.
In
Do you
Christ.
know, even
Yeah.
just talk, I'm struck, but even just talking about that, it's often in these conversations like the hopeful one that I mentioned earlier, but we talk about evangelism, sharing your faith. It's that stimulation of just talking about it
Yep.
actually does something.
Yep.
So if I translate that into kind of our church life settings and our liturgical life settings, how do we do this? How do we? I mean, is it Hebrews, spur one another on to faith? Or I can't remember. There's a lot. There's lots of let us in Hebrews, but let us not forget how we spur one another. Let us not forsake the assembling together.
Yep.
I think in that line is about spurring one another on to faith, and it's true.
I think that's right.
There's something about that, not in a manufactured way, but in a very heartfelt way.
Yep.
Which is the struggles,
Yep. And I think this is the missing piece in discipleship, because you know what? It's not, knowing lots of information about Jesus isn't actually knowing who Jesus is. And I come back to this, is that in sharing your faith, you actually come to know it better. In sharing Jesus, you actually come to know Jesus better. It's like looking at it, if you're looking at a beautiful sunset.
Yeah.
It doesn't become complete until you share it with the person sitting next to you. Don't you think that sunset's amazing? Somehow you know the sunset more deeply. You are loving it more when you share it with someone else. And another classic example has been a teacher. You know something, the inside of it. You really come to understand it once that you can share or teach someone else about it. There's something about sharing something that you grow into it more yourself. And I think that we've at the moment, for the past couple of years, it's been about discipleship to Jesus has been about learning more about Jesus for yourself. And there needs to come a time where discipleship becomes a sharing of your understanding of who Jesus is. Only there you will truly understand it.
Yeah.
Only then you'll truly be a disciple to Jesus.
And then there's the impetus there to learn more, because you realize how caught out you might be.
The spiritual the classic spiritual equation is the more you give away, the more you become full up.
Yeah.
It sounds like a paradox, but
The farther
actually
down you go,
in
the higher up you rise.
That's right. In the spiritual world, that's the equation.
Yeah.
And somehow we need to get back to that.
I think that's a good spot to end.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Lunch on the Way and for your support to this point. If you would like other people to know Lunch on the Way and to listen to these conversations that we have with ourselves and with other people, we would really encourage you to subscribe and review this podcast. That goes a long way. And also, if you want to share on any social media platforms, any episodes that you particularly find helpful for you as you reflect on your own Christian journey and discipleship to Jesus. Thank you for listening to Lunch on the Way.